Well, hello, I'm Chris Kromm, Executive Director of the Institute for Southern Studies and publisher of Facing South. And I'm here with Tram Nguyen, Co Executive Director of New Virginia Majority. We've talked to you before, Tram, for Facing South, and we wanted to reconnect after the historic elections in Virginia last month, which
Mhm.
saw strong progressive shifts across the state. Democrats now hold the governor's office in both the state house and the Senate. So there's a progressive trifecta. New Virginia Majority is involved not only in the elections, but also organizing and advocacy for progressive policy. So what you do after the elections as well. So thank you so much for joining us, Tram.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so first of all, tell us about New Virginia Majority and your work in the state.
So, New Virginia Majority is a statewide civic engagement, grassroots base building advocacy organization. We do a mix of everything, but at the heart of the organization is making sure that we are building power for working class communities of color, right? If we can build power for communities that are typically underrepresented, marginalized, left on the sidelines, and we really put their issues and the things that they're facing front and center and actually have leaders address those issues as we're building power and doing accountability work, then we will have fundamentally changed the system in Virginia and really improve people's quality of life.
So, what to you are the most important takeaways from the 2025 elections in Virginia?
I don't think it'll surprise you or anybody, right? That, when people think about what matters to them and given the current environment that we are in, right? I think that they are very much focused on, their livelihoods, their lives, right? And so we saw it across the board from the top of the ticket all the way down to even local races, that affordability and cost of living and making sure that people can stay and live in their homes safely and securely, right? Without fear of whether or not they're going to have a roof over their head, if they could put food on the table, if their kids can go to school without fear. I mean, all of these things were just, I mean, it's not rocket science, but at the same time, like it's it's really unfathomable to me sometimes that these things that are so seemingly basic are not being addressed in America, right? And so, cost of living, affordability, whether it's housing, healthcare, education, et cetera, were top of mind. And that to me, because every candidate ran on that with such discipline and rigor, right? That's the mandate that these incoming elected officials are going to have going into January when they all get sworn in. And we're excited about that because that means that we can pass things like paid family and medical leave and increase the minimum wage and take care of a lot of things that are going to help working families.
Well, you just segued right into the next question, which is now you do have this trifecta and you have some real room to maneuver and some space to do the things that you want to do. Tell us more about kind of what you think will be the most important issues for lawmakers to tackle in 2026.
I think the mandate coming from these elections is affordability, right? Is to really think about how we are easing the burden on people's lives. And, with House Bill 1 coming down from the federal government and the impact, for example, on healthcare and healthcare premiums, there are hundreds of thousands of Virginians that are at stake of like essentially losing their healthcare. And there are communities, entire communities in parts of Virginia that the closest hospital is 4 or 5 hours away, right? Like healthcare access is front and center. Um, Making sure that, when there is something catastrophic or some health need in a family that workers can take time off to take care of themselves or their loved ones. And so, as I mentioned before, paid family and medical leave has been something that a number of our coalition partners that we've been working with them on for years, and we're very excited to be able to start making progress on a lot of these things. Um, so aside from the economic justice bucket, and there I could go down a laundry list, Chris, of
Mhm.
things that I think we're excited to get done in year one. I mean, the other area that I think is really, really critical is around voting rights in our democracy. And what we're seeing right now in this country, right? That this country is clearly going into we're a backsliding democracy, frankly.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot at stake. And so are there some things that we can do in Virginia to really shore up our voting rights and make sure that we continue to have free and fair elections We know that the Supreme Court is gonna gut the Voting Rights Act again, right? And so one of my top priorities this year is how do we strengthen the Virginia Voting Rights Act? We were the first state in the South to pass it, pass the State Voting Rights Act. We used to have one of the strongest ones. Other states have surpassed us, like New York, and now I'm like, "Oh, no, my turn to catch right back up." Um, so, preserving our democracy, preserving our elections is really, important. And then I'd be remiss if I don't mention immigration, right?
Yeah.
Doing things to protect our immigrant communities. That is a big part of our base. And, the community is under attack. They are living in fear every day of what's going to happen when they send their kids to school. And so, can we think about some protections that we can put in place to make sure that our immigrant brothers and sisters actually are able to live and thrive in our communities as well?
Yeah. Well, and winning elections takes organizing, and advancing a policy agenda takes organizing. Could you talk a little more about what New Virginia Majority does, and what are some of the insights that you think you've gained either in this last election or recent years about what it takes to really win and really have an effective organizing program?
I think it's about showing up. It really is about showing up and building trust in communities. We have been doing this work in Virginia for about 18 years. And so when we show up in a community and we're saying, hey, this election's really important, you need to get out and vote. And we articulate why, and we're having real dialogue with folks about what's at stake. They understand that fundamentally, right? And they know that after November, our work isn't finished, right? They know that there is follow-up after November, and that is not our finish line. And so what happens next? What happens next? We start working with legislators to say, "Hey, can you introduce this bill that's going to address this issue that's been going on in our communities that our members, our leaders have been trying to address for many, many years?" They'll introduce the bill, and then our members are showing up in the General Assembly session, and they're telling their stories, powerful stories that you can't refute, right? And they are just our member leaders are just an integral part of the advocacy work that we're doing, right? We're not doing the work for them. We are doing the work with them. And that's where the power building comes in. And
Yeah.
folks have a real sense of ownership over it. And so, yeah, our members identify the issues that we work on, what we're going to advocate for, what type of policies we want it to get introduced, what candidates we endorse. Like they have a say in all of it because it's really about them and the base and having power for the base.
Yeah. And you mentioned the Voting Rights Act, which was so historic when Virginia passed that, and that was I know, a top priority to get that on the books, to have a law, something that could be used to advance voting rights and democratic access in Virginia. Was there anything from that experience? You said now you want to strengthen it. Was there anything from that experience when you were able to move some agenda last time? Now, as you look forward to 2026, what are some lessons you think you have for how you're going to work to really move things forward to the maximum way you can, I'm sure is what you're thinking about.
Yes, conversation started a lot earlier. I
Mm,
think, having been able to experience a democratic trifecta so recently, I mean, it feels like a long time ago, but it was really
yeah,
only 5 years ago.
right.
Um, I think we were so excited the last time around, and, there were so many bills that had just been in the queue or we've been fighting for so long. And, it was a short legislative session and it was like, "Oh, no." Like, we should have started talking earlier about, "Okay, we're gonna pass this great thing, but do we think about how it's gonna get implemented?" Right? This bill is actually going to be signed into law, and so did we draft it in such a way that it makes it easy for state government, for agencies to implement? And so this time around, we've started conversations way earlier, and we know that we wanna make sure that any bill that gets introduced in January in the General Assembly session is ready for prime time. We're not going to go through too many amendments in committee and like the sausage making and all of that. Like we just have to make sure that things are in a good place as possible so that we can really focus our battles where they need to be focused. So I think that is a big lesson. Um, and just to also like think to not be afraid to think big and bold, right, in terms of what we're trying to do, and really to continue to figure out how we can center our members in the decision-making process in terms of what bills get prioritized, what bills we want to advance first and foremost. Um, but yeah, lots of lessons learned, but we're excited. We're in a good place. I'm excited for January 14th when session starts to roll around, January 17th when the statewide candidates get sworn in to office, and it's going to feel like a new day.
It'll be interesting to see how far you can go. And I'm sure one of the challenges or opportunities of having a broad coalition like the one you work with, there's so many different issues that you can move on. And I'm sure the elections, all the issues that you mentioned, there were also like data centers and other things that came up
Yep.
that were just part of the mix. And there's so much to think about. One is interesting that I was just kind of interested that it came up on the news is like, would this be the year that the right to work law would be challenged in Virginia? And I know labor is one of the key constituencies you work with. I don't know if you think that there's a chance that something like that could be taken on.
I think that's part of the need to have very early conversations to make sure folks are all on the same page. I know a bill has been introduced around repealing right to work. I think the challenge, right, is that Governor-elect Spanberger has mentioned that she does not support a full repeal of right to work. That she's interested and um, would be willing to take a look at it and figure out what can be done, but a full repeal is not necessarily one of her priorities at the moment. And so that makes it a little challenging, right, to pass a piece of legislation that the governor elect has already signaled that she is not going to be in support of. But I think that speaks to the need, right, for us to collectively and across the board continue to build power for our communities and really think about what it would take to build out a public facing campaign to repeal right to work to actually create the conditions so that it's not just an inside game where you know groups are lobbying for a piece of legislation to pass, but there's also an outside game, right? That there's public accountability and general public demand beyond labor unions for repeal of right to work. And we're happy and excited to work with our labor unions and friends to think that through and see what can be done. Um, if not in this very next coming session, but down the road, like what can be done to actually start a conversation about repealing right to work.
Sure. So many different priorities to be taking on. So Virginia is the only state in the South with progressive majorities in their state legislature. And also, of course, having the trifecta. And it's been a long road to get to this point. You mentioned that there was the period where there was the trifecta, but then that was reversed for a while, and then you've kind of brought it back. What is your message to other Southern states that want to be the next Virginia and they want to shift power at the state level?
I think you have to fight for every inch you can get and continue to fight and hold on to any gains you have. There's going to be setbacks along the way, but I don't think any place is unwinnable forever. When we first started doing this work, folks across the country looked at Virginia and, they said the same thing.
Yeah.
You're insane. Like it's the South, right? It's the former capital of the Confederacy. Virginia went blue for Obama in 2008, but that was an anomaly, right? It was Obama. It was 2008. Because sure enough, in 2009, Democrats lost across the board in Virginia. And so, I think we have to if we really mean it when we say we need to build power for our communities and we need to build power for folks that have been on the sidelines, then we have to be willing to put in the work, over the long haul, right? Movement work is messy, movement work is long, but don't give up because I don't think any place is unwinnable forever, right? We have the conditions. People are generally aligned with us and are on our side. We just have to give them the political homes and the space for them to be seen and to be heard and to feel like they can build power collectively. Because once that energy is there, I think it just continues to build and build and build on top of each other.
Right. Well, thank you so much. We're going to be watching closely what happens, Virginia, and look forward to hearing from you about how things are going. Anything else you'd like people to know?
Yeah, I mean, maybe post legislative session, we can do another interview and I can go through, hey, here are all our victories. And this too can happen in other places. But we got to start somewhere.
That'd be great. That'd be great to follow up. Well, thank you so much, Tram Nguyen from New Virginia Majority. Truly appreciate your time, and I'll let you get back. All
Thank
right.
you so much for having me.
All right. Take care.